What's bubbling, magical people? Welcome back to the Witching Hour, where we like to talk about all things witchy and magical. I am Kimmy, aka Miss Merlin, psychic, shamaness, vulva, witch extraordinaire. So let's get into it. We started last week with a new series on deities. So we're going to continue with that. I did a poll on my social media asking if you guys wanted to hear about Hecate this week or about Odin. So Hecate won the vote, so that's who we are going to cover this week. We will get to a whole bunch of different deities from a whole bunch of different factions. Okay, so just bear with me as we move through the list. Some I'm more familiar with than others, but in those cases, we'll learn together. So that's really fun. All right, so Hecate is a key figure in witchcraft, okay? And I say key. The key is a symbol of hers. All right. So her origins are Greek mythology, but she's actually transcended that. Hecate is still really, really powerful. She's a symbol of empowerment. She is the goddess of witchcraft. She's the patron deity of magic and for witches. She's the goddess of duality as well. Now, this has been a little bit of a hot button topic and a bit controversial throughout the witch community, all right, on the pronunciation of her name. So I am going to put that to rest for all of you right now. All right. So, basically you come across 4 pronunciations for her name. So as I say it, Hecate, that just kind of rolls off my tongue better. All right. There's also Hecate or Hecate or Hecate. Okay. So those are all the kind of differentiations, right? And it is, like I said, a controversial subject. And here it is. In Greek, it actually is Elgate, okay? And that translates to any of those, okay? So it's personal preference what you use. So those people who, you know, I see them all the time on Witch Talk and stuff, people who put up those videos, it's pronounced this way, not this way. Okay, get over yourself, all right? That's your ego talking. That is not Hecate talking, because it's the intention of wanting to work with her, okay? She's not going to get all up in her knickers, so to speak, if you say Hecate or if you say Hecate, okay? So again, get over yourself. In the nicest way possible. All right, so as I said, she is the patron of magic and witches. She represents duality. She represents that line between life and death as well. Now, I mentioned that she had her start in Greek mythology. Okay, but again, she's transcended that, and now very, very popular with witches, okay? So especially in the Wiccan community, neo-paganism, eclectic paganism as well. Now, when she got her start in Greek mythology, okay, this was the clash of the titans, so to speak, all right? So when Zeus and his gang, were fighting for Olympus with the Titans, okay? So Hecate is actually a Titan. She is a daughter of Perseus and Asteria, all right? So Perseus was the god of peace, but also destruction and raw power. And Asteria, which actually translates to star, she represented magic, witchcraft, prophecy, the night, the moon, and the stars. So both of her parents bestowed both sides of their gifts upon her. She is known to bridge worlds. So when the Olympians overthrew the Titans were cast down, but 2 were kind of saved or kept there because Zeus recognized their power and their gifts. And especially Hecate, he spared her and honored her with a rare privilege. He gave her authority over earth, sea, sky, the living and the dead. She was allowed to move freely between these worlds, and she wasn't bound by the physical or the metaphysical. And that was a very rare thing. So there is another storyline, which I'm not going to get into because as we went over last week with some of the other stories, they all kind of mesh and entangle into each other. And if we went through them all, I would be here with you all day. So there is another story where it is said that Zeus pretty much was in love with Hecate's mother, Asteria. Okay, so that could be another reason why he chose to save her. But he also saved Helios. So Helios representing the day and the sun, right? And then Hecate representing the moon and the night. So she ruled over transitions, the unknown, making her the goddess of crossroads, choices, mysteries. To call upon Hecate was to summon raw, untamed power. That's why a lot of people feared it. And it was believed that the crossroads were gateways for spirits and that Hecate stood guard here with her torches, one of her signature things, to guide and light the way. It lights the path between the realms. She's a mighty protector. She honors the balance of power and respect, order and chaos, peace and destruction, illuminating the darkness between the living and the dead. So the symbols that are kind of pivotal for her in connecting with her energy, definitely the key, for sure. And that is her dominion over doors and thresholds, crossroads, gateways, right? She can lock and unlock doors. She can unlock the keys of, like, she has the keys of knowledge, the keys to the underworld. She has the secrets to magic. She can unlock all of these things. All right. She also, the dagger is associated with her as well. So that's the tool of focus, drawing boundaries, cutting through illusion. The form of the triple goddess. So when you see that depiction of the 3, the maiden mother crone, that is also associated with Hecate. Okay, the number 3, of course, 3 through 3, maiden mother crone. That lets her see from all angles. That's why that. She's also associated with dogs, especially black ones, with snakes, crows, polecats, poisonous plants, garlic, and we'll get into those a little bit. Okay, so the garlic is sacred kind of to her. So if you were setting up like an altar space where you were going to invite Hecate in, now that I'm going to talk about this briefly because this is important. As humans, we have free will, right? We cannot expect our guides, ancestors, deities, whatever, to intervene if we don't ask. Okay, because that would be overstepping free will and they cannot do that. Okay, so you have to invite them in. All right, so garlic is a good offering to put on an altar space or sacred space for her. Okay, she's also associated with the cypress tree because the cypress tree was about death and rebirth as well. I mentioned the poisonous plants. That mostly is hemlock, and that was used a lot in poisonings back in ancient Greece. So she is associated with that. The snake for shedding skin, transformation. Also, we just entered the year of the snake in Chinese New Year. So I think very significant. Maybe someone out there really, really needs to connect and invite in Hecate's energy. All right. So she's also associated, like I said, with the dogs, the black dogs. Now, there is another myth surrounding the black dog. I can't remember what the goddess's name is. I apologize. Like I said, I'm not as familiar with certain other things, what her story is, but I think she like leapt into the sea for some reason. Sorry. Oh, and Hecate turned her into a black dog. Okay, so that's I think it's her name was Hecuba, I think. Hecuba, the goddess Hecuba. But I'm not sure. Like I said, the story surrounding like why she leapt into the sea. Okay. But Hecate turned her into a black dog. Okay. That's one. And then there's also the 3-headed black dog, right? Who's also said to guard the underworld. And that's Cerberus. And that particular dog, is Hecate has dominion over Cerberus as well. Crows, messengers, because they're known as messengers between worlds, they carry wisdom and insight as well. So a lot of things that we hear about Hecate, some people surrounding the fear mostly. Okay, so that comes from the darker aspects of that, which she has control over ghost spirits, curses. She's a master of necromancy. When she calls upon the dead, they obey. Whether in necromancy rituals or in dark magic, she can wield them like weapons. And she can bend the laws of life and death to her will. People feared calling on her because she walks a fine line between life and death, and you have no way of knowing which side Hecate was going to choose for you, or if you'd get lost in the in-between. Now, the lighter side of this beautiful, beautiful, powerful goddess is she was a massive source of comfort and protection to those who sought her help. She watched over households to shield them from evil and misfortune. And it wasn't very uncommon in ancient Greece for people to leave offerings on their doorways and things for her to keep favor over their homes. She was a guide to those facing the unknown or any challenges that life threw their way that they were having trouble with. She is the goddess of wisdom, clarity for decisions also. She can light the way through shadowy things, and she helps people through confusion. Over the years, Hecate has also kind of merged with some other popular goddesses. It just seems to be the same. In ancient Greece, it was Selene, who was the goddess of the moon, and that became Selene, right? Hecate, also goddess of the night, goddess of the moon. So Selene and Hecate kind of merged as one. Also Artemis as well. That is lesser known. So back in ancient Greece, they used to have what was called the Deipnon, which was Hecate's supper. And that was held at the end of each month to make offerings in hopes of receiving her blessings. And it was also reverence for respect for the boundary of life and death. And now, to this day, on the 30th of November, that is also the Feast of Hecate. And so what you would do on that day to honor her is because she had such a strong connection and love for dogs, you could adopt a dog or volunteer at a shelter. Also, restoring run down things or neglected places, pieces as well. That's another way to honor her, because she was like that protector and guide for run down kind of and neglected people. They could call on her for protection and for good favor as well. Now, just really quickly, jumping back for a second to when I was talking about the pronunciation. I just want to say Practical Magic is one of my favorite movies. I love it. I love it. I love it. But whoever wrote the script there, you got it wrong. For those of you who've seen it, when they are trying to bring Jimmy back and they do the chant, they say, "Mighty Hecate, make it right." No. So, sorry. That's always really bothered me, so I just had to say it and just get it off me. But you would also hear mention of her in Shakespeare's Macbeth. Hecate was the goddess of witchcraft in Macbeth. So that inspired that as well. Now, we talked about her kind of merging into Artemis, Selene. Also, in Roman, she was known as Trivia. So that was also translates to three roads, right? Crossroads, choices. Again, the three coming through strongly with her always. So some of the stories that involved her heavily in Greek mythology, I'm not going to get into them in great detail because we'll cover some others later as I go into different deities and different factions and things. But she was definitely connected to Hermes. It is written in some of the mythology that they had a divine connection of sorts, a duality. He was a messenger, and so was she as well. Okay, you'd also know Hermes as Mercury, right? When Mercury goes into retrograde, that's who's in charge of that. There was also a powerful witch, again, ancient Greek mythology, Circe, and she is said in some myths to be Hecate's daughter. And one of her gifts was that she could transform people and gods into beasts if she willed it. Now, some other myths surrounding her had her with no children and no men in her life. Okay, but it depends on which depiction you're reading, I guess. Yeah. So also kind of a tale of highlighting the dark side also is the story of Medea. Okay. And again, you guys can look that up if you want to. I'm not going to get into that, but she was a really skilled sorceress. She basically interfered in a situation that she shouldn't have for a man. Excuse me. And then that man betrayed her. So she went into destruction and vengeance. She was misusing the gifts that Hecate had bestowed upon her. So those who use her magic for personal gain or to break natural order or bring harm will face her wrath. And that is exactly what happened in the story of Medea. So that just is another lesson to not misuse power, that things, magic and power and things like that are not for personal gain. You know, it's for the good of the whole, right? So, Persephone and Hades would be another story that you'd probably be familiar with, that she is completely linked to. So, when Hades saw Persephone, he instantly fell in love and wanted her, of course. And as we know, Hades is the ruler of the underworld, so he can't be anywhere but the underworld. He's kind of locked there, right? So he makes a deal with Zeus. And Zeus says, yes, you can have Persephone without telling her mother, Demeter, because her mother would have, no. So Hades decides to kidnap Persephone with Zeus's blessing. When Demeter finds that Persephone is gone, she falls into despair. She searches the ends of the earth, but of course, Persephone is nowhere to be found because she's been taken to the underworld, which is somewhere that Demeter cannot go. So in Demeter's despair, she froze the earth. All the agriculture went to crap because she's the goddess of agriculture. The land was bare, stripped, all of that. And it was Hecate who came forward and told her, basically, look, I didn't see it myself, but, I heard something. I went. There was nothing there. I know something's up. It's very sus. So let's go and talk to Helios, right? Helios, light, saw everything. Helios tells Demeter what really went down, that Hades kidnapped Persephone. And that is essentially how we have winter and spring, right? Because when Demeter finds out, she goes to Zeus. Zeus sees the error of his ways. He demands that Hades let Persephone go. But Hades has already given her that pomegranate that she's so famous for, that splits her soul, half human basically and half in the underworld. So in the spring, this is why everything gets beautiful and light and bright and blooms and stuff again. Because Persephone comes back from the underworld to her mother Demeter, who then releases the land from this frosty curse and lets all the agriculture grow again, and la-di-da wonderful. And then she, in the fall, has to go, of course, back to the underworld, and then Demeter is sad and in despair, so everything is frozen and the land is stripped bare again for the winter. Now, Hecate can travel between worlds, and she's welcome in the underworld as well as in the realm of the gods. So she becomes an ally, and like her and Persephone are like besties. Because when Persephone has to return back to the underworld, Hecate is always her guide with the torches. And it is also said in a lot of myths that Persephone had a really hard time, of course, adjusting to the underworld, and it was Hecate who kind of took her under her wing and comforted her and, showed her the ropes, so to speak. So, yeah, they're kind of besties, connected, always. And there are some other myths and stuff that, again, intertwine and connect her to other famous stories in Greek mythology. Now, a lot of people hear more of the shadowy, fearsome, terrifying, scary, fearful version of Hecate, right? You're taught to fear witchcraft and all those things that you don't understand. And that comes from the whole patriarchy, Christian Catholicism takeover. We talked about this last week with Freya, how a lot of stories were created by the church at that time to kind of discredit her as a goddess and make her look like she was just dark and promiscuous and all of that stuff. Well, they did the same thing to Hecate, forcing the narrative of her being more evil and don't go near that. No, that's not for you. So the focus was put on the darker things to scare people and to discredit her, of course. So, if you would like to be defiant against the don't go near that, then invite Hecate, whatever way you wish to pronounce it, invite her energy in. Especially if you're going through something, some sort of transition, you need to make some sort of decision, you need clarity on something, to help you cut through those illusions. So I mentioned garlic. We talked about some other things that are kind of sacred to her. So the cat, also the polecat is another one, and that's also connected to another story in Greek mythology, which I apologize. Like I said, I'm not as familiar with the other stuff. Like, I just know Hecate because I'm a witch from being eclectic pagan, right? So it's not from that aspect of things. But, so I don't know the names. I apologize. But the story is that this particular witch, and it starts with a G, I think like Golifina or something like that. If I got it wrong, please don't attack me in the comments because I already said I don't know. So this particular sorceress inserts herself in a situation that she shouldn't for Hera, right? One of Zeus's wives. That has to do with interfering with the childbirth. So another goddess that is the goddess of childbirth and all of that curses her that she will have to go through this reoccurring painful childbirth for the rest of her life, like this difficult childbirth. And she's also transformed into a polecat. So Hecate, being the very compassionate woman that she is, and also a curse breaker, she adopted the polecat and took her under her protection. So she didn't have to, go through that painful childbirth for the rest of eternity. And like, that's really mean. That's hardcore. Anyways, yeah, so if you want to, defy what you're supposed to and invite Hecate in, you can use some garlic, like I said. You could use a blade of some sort and put those in a sacred space and, light a candle and just say the words out loud or in your mind. Hecate, Hecate, whatever you want to say, I invite you in. Let her know the problem. If there isn't a problem and you just want her around, just invite her. But get specific. That's always better. Because like I said, free will, free will, free will. So, since we were kind of getting into we talked a little bit about Persephone and Hades. We're going to go back to that a little bit because we are going to talk next about Persephone. All right. The lovely and beautiful Persephone, the goddess and queen of hell and of spring. Duality. Lover. Ancient Greek translations, Persephonia, Persephassa, Persephata, and Therapaha. Okay, and I might have pronounced some of those wrong. If I did, I apologize. And that's just to name a few. So, Persephone didn't just have her starts in ancient Greek translations and mythology. She was also linked to other religious factions as well. So, before I forget too, in ancient Roman texts too, Persephone is referred to as Persephona, and she's also known as Kore. Okay, so that comes there too. And we talked about, I went into it a little bit in Hecate's story about the abduction of Persephone, right? The famous story of that. Well, that dates all the way back. The earliest telling of that is from a song. It's called the Hymn to Demeter, and it's from 7th century BC-ish. So, Demeter, of course, is Persephone's mother. Zeus was her father. So Zeus, being controlling, conspired with his brother, Hades, said, yes, you can have Persephone, but Demeter's no better either. She wanted to keep Persephone with herself. She turned down 2 offers of marriage, according to mythology, from Apollo and Hermes for Persephone's hand. But again, she wanted to keep her all to herself. So she said no. So both parents tried to control her destiny. Now, the reason why I don't really like this is because Persephone herself has no control of her destiny. She's just portrayed as just this little helpless woman, like, oh, help me, I've been kidnapped. And that's not the energy of her at all. So, again, quickly, her great-grandmother, too, the goddess Gaia, is also said to have conspired with Zeus and Hades for her kidnapping. I don't like that either. Terrible. Anyways. So they had her in the beautiful garden picking flowers, and she came across the narcissus flower. And when she smelled the narcissus flower, a hole in the earth opened up, and out popped Hades, and he kidnapped her. There you go. And that is also, like I mentioned, how they explain the seasons back in, ancient Greece. The winter being that time that Demeter is sad, and she's taken all the plentifulness from the earth. She just strips it bare. Like, it's just so awful. Like, it's so funny because, like, if you look at really ancient, like, gods and goddesses, the stories, like, they're all kind of, like, really egoic. There's a lot of partner swapping that happens, all those types of things. It really is quite interesting and amusing. So while Demeter's upset and she's got everything starving because Persephone is gone, she says, I'm never coming back to Mount Olympus either. So Zeus is like, oh, crap. Okay, well, the humans are starving. So without the humans, I have no one to worship me. So there, ego again. So seeing the error of his ways, finally, he demands that Hades bring Persephone back. But, as we know, Hades had Persephone eat a pomegranate seed. And it is said that once you eat something in the underworld, you have to stay there. All right, so again, because she was a goddess, her soul was split to be half there, half here. So another kind of story that involves Persephone has to do with Aphrodite as well, the goddess of love, and Apollo. So this would be another one of those Christian slanders. All right, because essentially Aphrodite and Persephone were fighting over Apollo. So even though Persephone is married to Hades, again, lots of partner swapping. She saw Apollo, fell in love with him. Aphrodite also in love with him. So they make a deal. Apollo spends so much time with Persephone, so much time with Aphrodite. And then the other third, he gets to choose. So he chooses Aphrodite. Persephone, of course, mad, jealous. So there's an eternal rivalry between those two. Again, over a dude. Okay. And like I said, gods and goddesses, not just the ancient Greek and all that, but if you look around like Norse paganism and other traditions and stuff, a lot of them were, as my grandmother would say, tarts. All right, so going back to the original kidnapping story, right? And the reason why I don't like it, it frames Persephone as weak, as a victim. That whole maiden, rescue me, not in charge of her own destiny, out of control of her own life. And the choices of others are imposed on her. But what if we reframe this, okay? And that when Persephone was taken by Hades, that she fell in love with him, and that she, in her own sovereignty, decided and made a compromise to stay, but then also get to see her mother. And what if she chose to eat the pomegranate seed, knowing full well what the consequences were to do so? Right? Then we can reframe it. Because she is the queen of hell, right? So she's not that weak victim type energy. And from other stories that we hear of Persephone, she is standing in her power in that queen role. So it is a paradox to look at her as the other in the initial telling of the story, right? But what she teaches us is to be brave enough to descend to the underworld, to confront our shadows, right? Letting your old self die off, letting the new self bloom. It's about personal growth, empowerment. The reason I can kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Make the narrative work, okay? The weak victim, not in charge of your own destiny, choices of others imposed on you. The reason why that works, though, is because anyone who has been traumatized or has felt like that in some way, that they have been a victim in a certain situation, or that they have been made to feel weak, or that they weren't in charge, or that somebody else had some sort of control over them. That is a really, really good time to connect with Persephone. She can really, really help with that energy, and showing you how to take your own sovereignty back. That's power over yourself, not over others. And to be brave enough to confront those shadows, set those boundaries, and be the queen. One of the other myths surrounding her that does really show her caring but authoritative side, right? And also her influence over Hades is the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. So Eurydice, I don't want to say the word because I don't want to get it blocked. She is taken advantage of by some bad people, okay? And she ends up dying, all right? And Orpheus is heartbroken, absolutely heartbroken. He's a musician, by the way. And you have to know this too. Once a human enters the underworld, they can't leave, all right? But Orpheus makes a deal, gets to go to try and find Eurydice. So he gets there, and Persephone is so moved by his love for her and his music that she persuades Hades, and she comes up with a compromise that Orpheus can take her hand and he can leave, but he can't look back. Not even for a second. If he looks back, game over. And what happens in mythology is they make it to the very end and he just can't resist anymore. He's like pretty much through the door, and he just wants to make sure that she's behind him. And he turns, catches a glimpse for a second, and she disappears. Very, very, very sad story. But anyways, that shows Persephone's kind of cunning compromise. She came up with that compromise, and that her influence over Hades, but also her compassion as well. Now, this type of story, the whole kidnapping and being forced or controlled by a deity, it's actually quite common. If you look around at different factions, it's called the dying and rising god archetype, right? So we see it in Catholicism. We see it with Osiris. We see it with Attis. We see it with Adonis, okay? It actually goes back to some certain stories written, ancient Sumeria, okay? That whole type of storyline. It's very, very common with just different players. Now, before patriarchy kind of took over everything, in more ancient times, people used to worship more of the goddess archetype as the bringer of life, right? And if you go back from scholars, Persephone is one of the most ancient goddesses that there is. Okay, so we would be calling on Persephone or inviting her energy in. Again, remember, free will. Okay, she's for love, mediumship. She also aids people in passing over as well. She watches over widows, very associated with that. And as I mentioned earlier, people who've been traumatized, who are in need of some healing. She rules over sirens as well, beauty magic. She's associated with the signs of Scorpio and Virgo, with Pluto and the moon, and the Sabbaths of Mabon and Ostara. And she carries the energy of Earth. So she's Earth energy. All right, so if you wanted to, again, invite Persephone in, if you're going to make kind of a sacred space for her and invite her in, you use some flowers, and depending on the time of the year, okay, so the flowers and the colors of things associated with what you're going to pick are going to be based on the time of year. So if it's more in a winter energy like now, you would be using more royal colors, okay, like royal blues and crimsons and like deep maroons, things like that, okay. More in the spring, summer, you're going to be using more spring, summery colors, pinks, pastels, things like that for offerings. Daffodils work really, really well in that spring energy as an offering for her, as well as roses, black crystals as well. She's also associated with aspen, cedar, or cherry. So if you wanted to use a little bit of bark there as well. You could also use ivy, poppy, and vervain. Those are also herbs associated with her. Grain, of course, corn. And for animals, that would be like the owl, the screech owl, and especially the bat, because the bat also goes between worlds. So that would be how you would invite Persephone in. So again, if you're going to be lighting a candle, you would choose one of the colors there associated with whatever time of year it is as well. That's going to help you tremendously. But just asking, that's really all it is. If you don't have stuff, you don't have an altar, that's okay. You don't really need one. All right, just speak it. You have to speak it. All right, so out loud, using your voice, saying it out loud to yourself in your mind, or very, very powerful, writing it down. Okay, you're setting that intention. If you're setting that intention to invite the energies in, they will come. All right, you have to trust it. Okay, you have to believe it. I'm getting that, oh my gosh. That, Kevin Costner movie, If You Build It, They Will Come. I was just thinking, if you ask, they will come. All right. So yeah, you got to do that. Okay. So, I just had a thought, just randomly here. If they explained the seasons through this story of Persephone here, and with Demeter's out of control emotions, how do you think they would describe global warming? I think it'd be very fitting, right? Demeter, perimenopause, hot flashes. That sounds about right to me. Overly emotional? Well, definitely something to consider. So Persephone, once invited in, will come in. She'll help you with any of the energies I just discussed there and previously, like anytime that you are feeling out of control or you have some trauma that you want to heal. She's very compassionate and loving energy for that, for sure. Really beautiful. For me, I'm not going to get too into it because these particular experiences are mine, and they're very personal and private and special to me, and I like to keep them that way. But sometimes for me, Persephone comes in with energy of like a pink mist and it just has this warmth to it that you can't really put into words. So that might help somebody out there, give you a little bit of clarification on whether your attempt to invoke her was successful or not. Maybe the color pink. Okay, even though we are in the winter months still right now. Well, that depends also what hemisphere of the world you're in as well. Got to take that into account also. All right. Well, that's what I have for you guys today. I really hope that you enjoyed it. We're going to get into, like I said, some more deities as the coming weeks progress. And if there is a particular deity that you're really interested in, send me an email or send me a message on social media and send me a suggestion, because I would definitely love to hear from you. And if I can make it happen, I definitely will. All right. So I will list all of my links below for all of my social media. You can find me at _Miss Merlin on all platforms that I'm on. Okay. And my email will also be listed below if you guys would like to book any personal services with me. All right. I will see you next week. And until then, stay magical, my friends.